Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Were They Thinking? In this show, we're going to take a look at some of the best inventions throughout history, and honestly, some that are just garbage, because there's always a good story out there, no matter where you look. My name is Stuart Brooks Myers. You can call me Stu, Stuart, SB Myers, SBM, whatever you want, just maybe not SM, because that really doesn't fit the theme of this show, but I digress. And let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a patent agent. I used to be a patent attorney, and I'm going to be a patent attorney again soon. I'm getting my law license reactivated after having taken about 4 years off to be a stay-at-home dad for our two lovely little time sinks. If you ever have a problem with too much patience, too much free time, or disposable income, anything like that, a child can really help you out in that department. Two really gets it done a lot better. Well, I'm getting back into my practice, and I've always loved thinking about ideas and innovation because at the heart of it, I firmly believe that human creativity and the desire to create something that betters our society is one of the hallmarks of goodness. It's one of the things that just makes for a good human. And I've worked with so many inventors over the years, and I've seen that process happen from inception of idea to the product hitting the shelves. But let me tell you this, the process always looks different. It's never the same. And there's so many detours, U-turns, right turns, left turns, back flips, everything you just can't imagine. And you've heard the cliche that truth is stranger than fiction, and nothing is more true. Also, this might be a little bit more, a little TMI, but I'm one of the laziest people you will ever meet. So whenever there's a product or a machine out there that makes my life easier, I will be the first in line, hopefully virtually, so I don't actually have to leave the house. Also, let me mention a little bit about the format of this show. It's going to be divided into two parts, not equal parts. The first 2/3 is going to be talking about this invention in general and leading you down the path of how it came to exist in the mind of its creator and what finally happened to it. Then the second third, and this is just sort of my own personal playpen, we're going to take a look at what would have happened had AI been around and been used by the inventor to invent the invention. How inventive is that, huh? Saying invent so many times in a row. Probably not so much. But I just want to take a few minutes of just wrapping into the story of what would it have looked like had AI been around. Okay, personal note. I think AI is pretty darn neat. It's pretty cool, yo. I enjoy using it. It has sped up my workflow by at least 60%. And it's a force multiplier for what I do. And man, that's just a clever way of saying I'm kind of a tech nerd. All right, so that's what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at AI in the second part of the show, which should be about the remaining 1/3. And on that note, let's go ahead and dig in to the first invention that we're going to be talking about in this series. And it is, for some people, just an absolute lifesaver. Have you ever asked yourself, what if dinner just happened while you did literally anything else? Well, if you've ever thrown ingredients into a pot at 8 a.m. and returned at 6 p.m. to a house smelling like divine goodness and eaten food out of a warm pot that's tasted like it's been stirred with ancestral wisdom and was made by a team of culinary elite grandmas all day long, well, you've met my good friend Irving Naxon, later anglicized to Naxon. And we're talking about, you know, the Crockpot. Well, here's something you may not know. The Crockpot all started with Irving, as a kid, hearing his immigrant mother talk about Sabbath stew, cooked low and slow, all day in a bakery oven that wasn't even turned on, and served on the Sabbath, so no Jewish laws about working on the Sabbath were broken. Well, grab a seat. We're going to roast some facts, skewer a few myths, and slow cook the legend of Irving. And by the way, I am not at all above awful puns. And within the last 4 years, I've developed a real taste, see what I did there, for dad jokes as well. But I'll try to limit myself. No more than one every couple of minutes, hopefully. Probably not. So please, just bear with me on that. If you can't develop the coping mechanism of laughing at children when they're screaming at you at 1:30 in the morning because you're not getting them the midnight popsicle that they've never had before in their entire life, but now suddenly is a must-have, good luck. Send me a note how you've done that, because I need all the tips I can get. So let's take a closer look at Irving. He was the quiet tinkerer behind the Crockpot and some other glorious inventions that you've probably never heard of, like Dolly Duds, which was a miniature washing machine that you attached to your kitchen sink and was used to wash doll clothes. I mean, really, that's not too far off the mark. I could see that. I could get behind that. He was also indirectly responsible for a lot of the 1970s avocado green appliances, some of the gelatinous meatballs made of grape jelly. I know, right? And he even was an influence in creating a TV melodrama that once made America suspicious of soup. Well, we'll take a look at those a little bit closer in a few minutes, but let's go back to the origin story of the Crockpot. Because like with every delicious tale, you got to get the right ingredients. You have to set the stage before you get too far in. Now, Irving was born in 1902, and he had exactly the kind of energy that you wanted in a kitchen gadget inventor. He was calm, persistent, yet very obsessed. Picture a man who could fix a radio, come up with a washing machine for dolls, and I love this about him. He wanted to file patents on the cheap, so he went to law school and became a patent attorney to file his own patents. I mean, talk about a man after my own heart, a DIYer in all respects. This guy, I would have loved to have met him. But getting back to the beginning, the Crockpot began with a dish called colander. If you've never heard of it, imagine if beef, beans, barley, and some veggies were, hanging around in a hot tub, getting to know each other overnight. There was some low and slow heat until they were all on a first-name basis. Well, that's what Irving's mother made that kicked off this whole thing. She grew up in Vilna, where Jewish families would load a heavy crock with colander on a Friday afternoon, walk it to the local bakery, and let the residual heat of the cooling bakery oven do the work while everyone rested for the Sabbath. Then in the morning, boom, tender stew, no standing at the stove, no stirring, and it just worked. It was there, ready for everybody. This image lodged in young Irving's brain like a hot coal. The idea of a communal oven doing the gentle work while life happened around it stuck with him. Now, let's go ahead and fast forward a few years. We're going to cut to some of the good stuff here. We'll get to the real meat of the matter. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop. I love dad jokes. I love puns, but even I have to admit it's time to just pace myself a little bit. Now, let's fast forward to 1936 Chicago. Irving, now a grown engineer and freshly minted patent bar passer, because, like I said, he couldn't afford a lawyer, sketched out the idea for a cooking apparatus. This was a heating cradle that hugged a removable crock, and that heating apparatus held a steady, gentle temperature for hours. He filed the patent in May of 1936, and trust me, as someone who has personal knowledge of working with U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, this is par for the course. It did what it does best. It took its time, 4 years to be exact, and granted him the patent in January of 1940. And even by today's standards, that's pretty fast, right? You wouldn't expect that, but no, I've had clients, and well, here's the thing, it's hit and miss. I've had a client who filed an application, and in 6 months, their patent was granted with no office action. It was the quickest I've ever seen. I was amazed. It was for a non-elastic bed sheet, all right? So imagine this. You've got a bed sheet, and you know what fitted sheets are like. They've all got that strip of elastic down on the bottom that tightens it underneath the mattress. Well, the more you wash those and the more you expose it to heat, the faster the elastic degrades. So my client had come up with a combination of materials and fibers that would essentially serve that purpose. It would anchor the fitted sheet underneath the mattress, but it was non-elastic, yet it still had a little bit of stretch. So regardless of how many times you washed it and dried it, it would never lose its effectiveness. And they marketed it towards institutions such as hospitals, prisons, hotels, those large institutions that had commercial dryers and also had high cost for replacement linens. And it was great. It solved the need perfectly. By the way, that's one of the things I love seeing is how people see a need out there and what they come up to fill it. A lot of times what they do, I never could have imagined. My imagination is absolutely zero, which is why I don't have any inventions. I just help people along that process. Okay, now let me untangent myself here and to say that a period of 4 years is actually right in the middle of the ballpark. Sometimes I've seen the Patent and Trademark Office take as long as 6 years. And what's the difference? You're asking yourself, right? Like, why 6 months versus 6 years? And it all has to do with what's called the art department. In other words, art is considered to be the area of technology or the type of invention that you're dealing with. And the USPTO divides every invention up. They assign it to a specific art department. And within that department, there's as they say, subject matter experts, which are really people who are probably fresh out of engineering school, recently, graduated from law school, lawyers that may or may not have passed the bar, or pretty much anyone else who signs up for the job. And they receive several months of training, and they have managers over them that have seen these kind of inventions before, and that's your expert. Not that I'm bitter or anything like that after having dealt with a lot of examiners. But those subject matter experts know what they're looking at. They know the existing fields, and they know essentially what's already out there, what's already been invented, and they're able to review new applications in that light and get back to you on what's allowable and what's not. So apparently in my story, bed sheets and linens, there's not a lot going on. Not a whole bunch of people inventing new bed sheet technology in the 2000s. Whereas if you move over to something like wireless technology, software-related inventions, or now anything related to AI, well, let's just say in those fields, business is a-booming. Yep, that's an Inglourious Bastard reference, one of my more favorite but can never watch it again movies because it's just way too traumatic for me to see now. And so the more popular your technology is, the longer you have to wait to hear back from the USPTO. And so to me, I'm reading the fact there was a 4-year delay in 1936 to get back to Irving's patent, that there was probably quite a few kitchen gadgets or other appliances hitting the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. All right, now back to the story. From the drawings of Irving's original application, his first Crockpot looks like the great-grandparent of your current slow cooker. It was a simple shell and had a simple electric element around the sidewalls of the crock. And heat would just kind of nudged itself inward as well as outward. Kind of like how a patient 6th grade coach would nudge that, 12, 13-year-old football player onto the field for the first time in a game. Patient, gentle shove with love. All right, heat, get in there. All right, player, get in there. It was probably the same thing. Now, the problem was, in 1940, America was not quite ready to wrap their head around the concept of a pot that would tell it, hey, I'm going to handle dinner. You go live your life. Not yet. War loomed, and novelty appliances weren't the thing. They were not the moment. The good thing is, Irving, probably diagnosable or on a spectrum of some sort, was focused. He was focused like a laser. He never forgot his Crockpot. And let's fast forward again to 1950s. Now we're after the war, and he revived it. I guess it might have been sitting on simmer in his mind throughout the... Okay. I'm sorry, I said I'd stop. I have such a problem with this. Well, by the 1950s, he began selling his slow cooker to the public. Unfortunately, branding wasn't one of Irving's strengths. Coming up with a good name for his invention just wasn't in the cards for him. He was totally Ohio at it and definitely didn't aura farm with the first few tries. All right, and right there, that ends any attempts I will have at current Gen Alpha speak. I promise you, no more of that. Okay, we're done. Like a blackjack dealer, shaking their hands, I'm out. Well, the first couple names he tried were the Boston Beanery. That didn't work. And then he came up with the Naxon Beanery. And then finally he settled on the Flavor Crock, Just think about that for a minute. The flavor crock, I have no imagination, but even I know that's a no-go. And he marketed this thing as a bean cooker, but it was a device that could do stews, soups, braises, and I'm pretty sure like 17 forms of pot roast like it does today. Well, it didn't find its way into suburbia or at the time contemporary homes, but it did gather a following in luncheonettes and coffee shops. Those were places where a pot could sit and hum and be dangerous to touch on the outside, kind of like the cornballer, if you've ever seen Arrested Development. Oh man, I love that thing. All day long without complaint. But the mainstream, they were more in love with instant coffee and TV dinners. This whole idea of a pot that took anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to come up with a meal that was essentially half a day away was not within their attention span. Well, now let's hit fast forward on the 8-track and jump to 1970s. Irving wanted to retire. So he did have a book. He was selling his slow cooker well enough to form a business around it, and it was generating some income. But he wanted out. So he took his company and the slow cooker patent to the rival company in Kansas City. And not rival as in someone who he's competing with, but the company's name was actually Rival Company in KC. And unfortunately, and here's a huge mistake that not only Irving made, but I see a lot of other inventors make for quite a while. He sold everything to them, including and especially, the patent and the IP rights for a lump sum. He didn't take stock in the company. He didn't take any future royalties, and royalties are gold. If you get a patent, the number one thing that you want to look for are a licensing agreement to another manufacturer with a reasonable royalty in return. Because with the licensing agreement, what you're basically doing is you're saying to this other company, hey, I'm giving you the rights to make and sell my product, but in return, you got to give me a cut. You got to give me a percentage of the revenue. And that model lets you, kind of like having a slow cooker, sit back and do nothing while money pours in over time. And it's up to that company that you license it to do all the advertising, manufacturing, market penetration, everything. And you just get the cash. It's the holy grail for inventors to get a licensing agreement with royalties in return. Unfortunately, Irving, he just went for a clean exit and peace of mind. And I get it. By this time, he was 68 and just wanted a nest egg. And that's what he got. Oh, Irving. Oh, dear sweet Irving, if only you had known. But how could you? Hindsight's 20/20, and at the time, I'm sure he was happy with his choice. But what Rival did is they took a look at the beanery and they said, sweetheart, we're going to get you a blowout and a stage name. It was like ANTM on steroids. They re-engineered the casing, presumably so it would no longer cornball anyone touching it. Then they bundled it with a glossy recipe book and rebranded it with the 2 syllables that would forever be immortalized in bridal registries for the rest of time. They called it the Crockpot. Then they debuted it at the 1971 National Houseware Show in Chicago. And like a debutante at prom, it was center stage. The Crockpot kind of became like a person. It became that roommate who lived in people's kitchen that would stay out of the way, yet could tenderize chuck roast, could prepare an entire dinner without you doing anything. It was a good friend for a lot of people. Now, I'm going to sidetrack for just a little bit again and tell you what makes a product successful. There's 2 things, and in my experience, these are the only 2 things that result in an idea or an invention hitting it. First, effort. The more effort that you put into it, the more return you're going to get out of it. In my practice, I've seen a ton of clients come in with fantastic, wonderful ideas, and they get it protected. And then you know what? They don't do anything. They either forget about it or they just get their patent and it sits on a shelf not doing anything. No money comes in. It's never heard from again. And then on the other hand, I've seen people come in with some ideas that I think are just, wow. What's a polite way for saying terrible without offending anyone? No, let's work on that. But I've seen some ideas that aren't the best. Yet these people, bless their hearts, they are tireless, they're dedicated, they're hungry, and they put so much effort and goodwill and energy into selling what they have. And you know what? Those things blow up. They explode. They make them money, and these people realize their dreams. There's a direct 100% correlation from what I've observed in effort to income. If you were to ask me what the key factors in invention success are, that's the only one I could say that's a 100% indicator of commercial success, effort. Then to go along with it, and this helps but isn't absolutely necessary, is timing. When your product hits the shelves. And it's huge, don't get me wrong. If you're introducing something ahead of the curve, you're gold. If you come up with an improvement at the right time when society's ready for it, you're money. And that's what the Crockpot was in 1970. You see, at that time, there was a lot of shifting gender roles. More women were working outside of the home, and we began to see dual income families. But the problem is that dinner didn't stop being expected. It just became a nightly project to be managed by two partners or to be figured out by someone who was gone all day long. Rivals saw that, so they ran ads that winked at that new reality and basically said, hey, you know what, this thing here, your friend, the Crockpot, it cooks all day, even when the cook's away. And what they wanted it to do is they wanted to read like a polite way of saying, you're doing everything, here's a plug-in accomplice. And they got that message across. Families leapt at this thing. And the colors at that time helped too. Maybe not so much now, but then, harvest gold, avocado green. Those were the official palette of my living room. Has an egg-shaped chair and a conversation pit. Shag carpet, it's our thing. How about you? And if you didn't own a Crockpot, you at least went to a party where something was suspiciously beige, yet delicious, that came out of one. That's the 70s. And what happened was sales shot from promising with Irving's business to absolutely bananas. Within a few years, the Crockpot was the kitchen equivalent of a Beatles single. If you didn't have one, you knew someone who did, and they would talk about it. What also helped were the recipes that Rival included. They knew their audience. Here's a mental exhibit for you. At the time, one of the more popular and famous images that a Crockpot generated was that of meatballs bobbing in a sauce of grape jelly and chili sauce. They were sweet, they're tangy, and they're a dare. Here's another one, Exhibit B. Hot dogs cooked in their own juices, which sounds like a threat, and yes, tragically, they worked. Maybe you know someone that has mentioned this or went to a party with one, or maybe anyone that you talk to knows exactly what you're talking about and they won't admit it. But not only was the Crockpot a success in the kitchen, it had a huge cultural footprint. It made a cameo in Beverly Cleary's Ramona and Her Mother, and what might be one of the most emotionally accurate depiction of a weeknight meltdown ever written. What happened was the Quimby family trudged home only to realize no one remembered to turn the Crockpot on. The house was cold, the tiny red power light was off, and dinner was raw. Instead, pancakes happen, big feelings are had, and the parents decided to argue about flapjack doneness. Essentially, this Crockpot became like another TV character. It's crazy. When was the last time you seen that happen? Except for Cornballer. I gotta stop mentioning the Cornballer. I love that thing. Ow. You've got to see Arrested Development. One of my most favorite shows ever. Now, after its sizzling hot sales in the 70s, which is kind of ironic for a slow cooker, the 80s brought a cooling off period. During the 80s, people bought microwaves. Working moms had even less time. Crockpot recipes that insisted you must brown meat first for flavor kind of defeated the point of having that friend that was supposed to do all the work for you. Millions of people started to wonder, why am I cooking and doing dishes at 7 a.m.? Sales cooled off. The Crockpot retired its disco wardrobe, put up the gold chains, and, just waited. Then, fortunately, nostalgia and common sense brought it back. New slow cooking recipes oozed away from the cream of whatever soups and more onto actual vegetables. A lot of food writers started to remind us that low heat plus time equals tenderness and forgiveness, and that was a huge selling point. The Smithsonian even put an avocado crockpot in the collection, kind of like a saint. And then something kind of crazy happened. In 2018, NBC's This Is Us briefly turned a slow cooker into public enemies. An old fictional slow cooker sparked a TV house fire. A beloved character died. And then suddenly America was side-eyeing its favorite chili maker. Well, Crockpot opened its first ever Twitter account, told us, "We're safe, we swear." The showrunner reminded everyone, hey, it's just fiction, and you know what happened? Sales added up. Only in America do we mourn a TV dad and then impulse buy the appliance that allegedly did him in. And yes, that was the whole TV incident that made America side-eye its soup. Now, here's what's interesting. Digging into the numbers, Rival actually saw a sales bump of about $300,000 as a result of that TV drama. There was also a trending campaign called #Crockpot is innocent. And reportedly, sales grew about 3.1% year over year, despite the PR scare. I mean, that's pretty... Oh, goodness. I gotta laugh. I guess that was a marketing victory for them. Now, how has the Crockpot done since then? Well, the numbers are pretty big. In 2023, the global slow cooker market was valued between 1.8 and 1.9 billion. And in 2024, estimates placed it around 2.2 billion. And projecting outward, growth of slow cookers is expected to hit 3.7 billion by 2033. Oh, Irving, if only you had figured a way to just latch onto some of this for at least, your estate or your kids or something. Oh, buddy. Well, anyway, what we can see from the numbers is the Crockpot and other slow cookers are around to stay for quite a while. And personally, I'd have to chalk it up to the healthier recipes. There's been a big turn in people wanting home-cooked, homemade meals that aren't going to close off their arteries like the LA freeway system. Well, this puts a lid on the general segment of the show. Okay. It's been a while. Come on. That one's okay. It's been a few minutes. And now we're going to turn to the AI segment. Because, hey, let's face it, there's definitely nothing slow cooking about AI these days. That stuff's on fire. Fire. Okay, sorry. Beavis and Butthead reference. I'm probably aging and dating myself. And maybe not the best reference to attach to. But, oh, goodness. The things that run through my head, sometimes I need to keep them on the inside, but they come out of the inside and go to the outside. That's the problem. So here's what I want to do today. I want to take a look. What would happen if Irving had used AI to help invent his Crockpot? Well, the problem is, and here's kind of a big hurdle to overcome, is that the Patent and Trademark Office has made it abundantly clear. They can't yell at the top of the lungs louder than they already have, that only humans can invent stuff. Federal Circuit literally said, we do not need to ponder philosophy. The statutes say individual, and individual means a person. In other words, an AI, a computer, an algorithm, software program cannot be the inventor of a single thing. So what happens is, and this has actually happened before in a case called DABUS, D-A-B-U-S. It's one of the seminal cases regarding this question. An artificial intelligence that invents something can't do it. If you try to file a patent where an AI is the inventor, they're simply not going to even take a look at it. Now, this is interesting. It doesn't mean they're going to reject the application. They're just simply not even going to take a look at the application. And that's huge. Because if they were to take a look at an application and reject it, there's a lot of recourses available. There's a lot of things that a patent attorney or patent agent can do to get over a rejection, circumvent it, argue against it. The list goes on. But if they don't even accept an application, that's like closing all the doors before you've even gotten to the hallway. You have no options in that case. Well, does that mean you can't use AI to invent stuff? Not at all. It's a balancing act. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has recently released guidance clarifying that AI-assisted inventions can be patented, as long as the human made a significant contribution to the conception. So in other words, you can use like a robot sous chef, but the human must be the head chef. Think of it this way. If you merely typed into ChatGPT or Meta or Google, Gemini, whatever you have, make me a better Crockpot, and then filed whatever came out of the printer and landed at your feet, you're not going to get anywhere. This is a recipe that's not even going to hit the table. But if you've framed the problem, received output from the AI, then guided constraints, perhaps refed in some new parameters, selected among options from the AI, possibly integrated potential features, you've added safety devices, or otherwise you've moved the idea from an AI-suggested blob in a pot to something that's specific and claimable made by you with the help of AI, then now you're cooking. So let's apply this to the Crockpot and really analyze what would have had to happen for Irving to be able to use it. If he had sat down at an AI design suite, whatever that looks like, and said, I need a heating wrap that keeps liquid at 93 degrees Celsius, plus or minus 1 degree, and it has to minimize bottom scorching, and it uses under 200 watts, and then the AI spitball a dozen different pot geometries or heating element placements. And then let's say Irving took those and he ran some tests. He tossed 9 of the ideas. He tweaked the 10th. And he paired that with a certain lid design that the AI possibly also proposed. Then let's say he added something like an overvoltage safety cutoff that the AI didn't think of because, well, honestly, if you've worked with AIs, they're like hyper-intelligent toddlers, super focused and super, super good at one specific thing. Maybe playing with a block or making a mess on the floor, or throwing their cottage cheese at the dog, whatever. They're great at that, but you have to stay on top of them. And so there may be elements to the design that the AI didn't come up with that Irving did. Anything he adds further strengthens his argument that he is in fact the inventor of this finished product. Now, if Irving sits down and writes claims to the geometry that he selected, the control curve for the wattage of the heating element, and to the safety interlock, that's inventorship that he can stand on. The Patent and Trademark Office is going to say, okay, we see that Irving, you're a person, you're the inventor, AI assisted you. We'll examine this, and it's possible for you to get a patent. But wait, there's more. Now, you might have been wondering, how much human creativity is enough? What satisfies that test of significant contribution to at least one claim? That's the thing, is not all the claims have to have had a significant contribution. Any that don't will be eliminated. But as long as there's one claim where a human significantly contributed to that claim, then the PTO will examine it and a patent could possibly issue. Generally speaking, the significant contribution has to be something that a human picks, shapes, or refines in terms of inventive features and not merely rubber stamps what the AI tells them to do. So in other words, if you're familiar at all with copyrights, think of it kind of like a derivative work, where if you have an original song, if you make a derivative work out of it, that may be fair use in terms of copyright infringement. Well, if you take something, an element that the AI gave you, let's say a lid design, and you interpret it by maybe reshaping it, making it out of a different material, or coming up with your own design, rejecting it, then that's a significant contribution. If you just take the lid design that the AI gave you and drop it on top of the crockpot, you do not pass go, all that stuff. No love, no bueno, no good. So remember, it's the setting of the constraints, the interpreting of the results from the AI, and making the inventive leap to something that's functional. That's the lane you have to stay in. Those are the human lanes. Spitting out ideas and coming up with different ways of doing something, that's the AI lane. You have to take those results and essentially just do something important with them. Now, what happens if for an edge case, like something right on the line where the AI genuinely invents something that you never could have imagined? That's a great idea. Let's say you asked it for better heat distribution and the AI came up with a new ceramic composition and a self-tuning algorithm for the heating unit that eliminated the need for a mechanical thermostat. That's freaking brilliant. Whoa, that's amazing. The problem is you didn't nudge it. It surprised you. If you take that, you didn't do anything in coming up with that new inventive step, but it's functionally superior to anything that you could have come up with. Can you still claim inventorship? Well, here be dragons. If you can't honestly say you contributed to the conception of that particular claimed advance, the safest play, the answer is no, but the safest play is to either narrow your claims to the features that you did shape. In other words, don't try to claim what the AI made, just only claim what you made, or keep inventing and keep refining on your end until you, the human, can author something, write something down where a significant contribution exists. Alternately, okay, and here's where strategy comes into play that you're not going to get from AI, because AI is good at technical stuff now, and it's beginning to get the foundations of strategy, but it's not a good substitute yet for experience and years in the field. And actually, okay, here's another tangent. I had a conversation with an inventor a few weeks ago, actually, at a conference, and he asked me, can AIs write patents yet? And I had to tell him no, but not for the reasons that he thought. If you were to sit down and you were to tell an AI what your invention was and give it all the information, it could probably draft out a technically correct patent with proper antecedent basis. It could probably put in all of the correct references in the specification to support your claims and just do everything, all the nuts and bolts that you needed it to in order for it to get by an examiner. The problem is, here's what it can't do yet. It can't look at the higher level picture and ask itself, who's the target audience of this patent? It can't look at the strategy behind what you do and don't put into your patent application unless you know what you're looking for. And most lay people don't know strategically what to include and what not to include. Okay? So, for example, there may be some features of your invention that you don't want to put in there because you want to do something like publish them immediately in a trade journal as a defensive maneuver because you've now made these features public. So what happens is sometimes people will disclose things and write a trade journal just to trigger that bar and prevent competitors from using those features, all right? But if you had not done that, and if you had left it in your patent application, those things aren't published for 18 months. And there's a lot more strategy that goes into patent applications than that. And there's a lot more strategy choices to be made. There's some things that go on that I would personally consider to be a dirty pool, but technically don't violate any ethical or statutory guidelines. And that's what AI doesn't know. It doesn't know, it can't do that. Maybe someday. I honestly see artificial intelligence phasing out most attorneys and most patent practitioners within about 3 to 5 years after it somehow gets trained on strategy. And that's, I think, the one big thing that's missing right now. There's probably more missing, but, I haven't dove too deeply into the ins and outs of trying to use AI to solely author an entire patent. That's not wise at this point. Like that hyper-intelligent toddler, you got to keep eyes on it at all times. Otherwise, it's going to go stick its wiener into a light socket. Trust me, those things can happen. Did I say that? Was that another one of those comments that came from the inside to the outside? Probably. Okay, so let's hop back into our story here. And here's another twist to the whole AI patent thing. And that's the test of obviousness. Now, if you're familiar with patents at all, you know that a couple of the requirements, there's a lot of requirements for something to be issued as a patent. One of the big ones is it must be non-obvious. In other words, someone of reasonable skill in the field would have to take a look at what you did. And if they say, hey, yeah, that's an obvious improvement, then you cannot get a patent on it. That is kind of a counterintuitive test because you think, hey, you know what? I've taken what's been done before and I've made it better. Well, it has to be made better in a way that isn't obvious to someone of reasonable skill in the art. That's the technical language. So what would an example of obviousness look like? Well, let's say you're working with boots. And the current state of the technology, and this is just a hypothetical, is that all boots have only punches in the leather through which the laces go through. And that's it, just little holes in the leather along the sides of the tongue where you stick your laces through and then you lace up your boot. Well, now let's say you've come up with metal grommets that you put into each of those holes to protect the leather and make the boot last longer. Well, you know what? That's not going to cut the mustard. That's not going to get you a patent for your invention. What's going to happen is, and it's so frustrating, an examiner is going to take a look at your metal rivets, and then they're going to do something that I definitely wouldn't call unfair or, sneaky, and go out and say, look at tarps, big plastic tarps that have metal grommets as well for a rope to go through so you don't rip through the plastic of your tarp. And they're going to say, you know what? If we take your boot metal grommets and then we look over there at those tarps that have the metal grommets for putting the rope through, it would be pretty obvious that someone else that makes boots would take those grommets, shrink them down, and put them into your boots. And your improvement is just an obvious adaptation of another technology. No patent. Go home. So with AI, that obviousness test, the test of whether your invention was an easy leap from what already has been done before, is shifting because as AI tools become more common, it's well known that they're just trained on already what's out there. And if you ask an AI to optimize something or to improve a part of your machine or even to come up with a new machine, you're essentially asking it to take a look at the entire pool of prior art, in other words, what's been done before, and then spit back to you a list of features or choices. So a real question is starting to emerge whether or not obviousness was a huge leap from what's been done before when you use an AI, or was it just predictable because that's all an AI does? It takes what you input and predicts what you want to hear. And those legal questions haven't really been answered yet, but they're on the horizon. And there's a lot more patent-related legal questions too that are coming down the pipeline. In fact, humble brag, I just wrote an article in which there's a potential, according to U.S. patent law, that purpose-built AI systems, in other words, something like, let's say, Meta or OpenAI, craft an AI system that's specifically designed to create new cancer-fighting drugs. Well, there's a potential out there that the developers of that AI system may have to be afforded some ownership rights for any cancer-curing drug that's invented using their AI. And it's kind of a technical reason why, but that's a problem, okay? And that hasn't been answered yet. USPTO actually offers guidance to say that might in fact be the case. So it's something to think about. And we're several months away at this point from seeing those type of systems being introduced. Google, Meta, and OpenAI have all been documented, and there's news articles saying that they're working on such things. So back to the Crockpot now. If today's slow cooker, if the Naxon beanery were born in an AI-assisted lab, would the AI get ownership or would Irving? Well, legally, Irving would still get it, but he would have to make changes to whatever the AI told him. Only he could be the inventor, according to the Patent and Trademark Office, and he would have to make significant contributions to whatever the AI told him in order to get that patent. All right. Well, hey, that's the story for today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being a part of this vessel for me to tell dad jokes and some pretty terrible puns wrapped around the guise of invention talk with some patent-related stuff thrown in it. I mean, really, this is just a vehicle for me to devolve to terrible, terrible humor. All right, and for the next episode, I'm thinking about doing something with Post-it notes, but we may all have heard that before. I don't know yet. I don't exactly know what the next show is going to be about. But please tune in, please subscribe, but tell your friends about it. And here's how you should pitch it to them. Hey, check out this podcast. This guy has way too much time on his hands. there's the hook. All right, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.